Hello everyone, this is Mr. Vanderpool. So we're going to move on here and talk about exchange rate determinants, the things that will shift either the demand or the supply for a currency. The first one is consumer tastes. So let me give you an example. For example, a preference for Japanese goods creates an increase in the supply of dollars because people are supplying dollars to get yen. So they are supplying dollars in order to demand yen in the currency exchange market, which leads to a depreciation of the dollar and an appreciation of the yen. So once again, you have a preference for Japanese goods, which means people are buying those Japanese goods, so they need to supply their dollars in order to demand yen to buy those Japanese goods. So the dollar depreciates and the yen will appreciate. Your second determinant is relative income. So for example, if Mexico's economy is strong and the U.S. economy is in recession, thus creating a fall in the U.S. price level, that's key, then Mexicans will buy more American goods. Basically, they're bargain shopping. The Mexicans know that they could get cheaper goods in the United States, and so they will go ahead and buy those American goods. This will increase the demand for the dollar, and in order to get those dollars, they're going to have to supply pesos. So it's going to be an increase in the supply of the peso and an increase in the demand for the dollar. And this is going to cause the dollar to appreciate and the peso to depreciate. Alright, moving on here to a couple more determinants. This next one is actually very similar to the relative income, and that is relative price level. So for example, if the price level is higher in Canada than the United States, then American goods are relatively cheaper than Canadian goods. And Canadians will want to import more American goods. So in order to import those American goods, they are going to need dollars. So the Canadians are going to go ahead and supply Canadian dollars. So you're going to have an increase in the supply of Canadian dollars. And they're going to buy the American dollar. So that there is going to be an increase in demand for the American dollar. This is going to cause the US dollar to appreciate and the Canadian dollar to depreciate. So once again here, basically what's happening is people in other countries are buying the goods where they are cheaper. And the last determinant here is speculation. So for example, if U.S. investors expect that Swiss interest rates will climb in the future, Americans are going to demand Swiss francs. So there is going to be an increase in demand for the Swiss franc. In order to get those Swiss francs, the Americans are going to supply the dollar. So there is going to be an increase in the supply of the dollar and an increase in demand for the Swiss franc. Okay, they're doing this in order to earn higher rates of return in Switzerland. This is going to cause the dollar to depreciate and the Swiss franc to appreciate. And if, let's say, the U.S. stock market was doing really, really well, once again, people in other countries would need to, in order to buy into the U.S. stock market, would need to demand dollars, and they would need to supply their currency in order to buy the dollars. Thus, they can buy into the U.S. stock market. Now let's talk about exports and imports. So the exchange rate is a determinant of both exports as well as imports. appreciation of the dollar, when the dollar becomes stronger, it causes American goods to be relatively more expensive and foreign goods to be relatively cheaper, thus reducing exports and increasing imports. So for example, if the American dollar becomes stronger, it's actually easier for us to buy the goods of other countries. So because of that, you are going to have an increase in imports. But people in other nations, American goods are more expensive because their currency doesn't buy as many dollars. And this is going to reduce exports. Thus, the appreciation of the dollar is going to reduce exports, increase imports, and ultimately you're going to see net exports go down. And of course, this can hurt the amount of aggregate demand in an economy. A depreciation of the dollar is going to do the exact opposite. So depreciation of the dollar causes American goods to be relatively cheaper and foreign goods to be relatively more expensive, thus increasing exports and reducing imports. So if the American dollar becomes weaker, you have a depreciation of the dollar. What's going to happen is goods in other countries are going to become more expensive because their currency is stronger than ours. And so because of that, where Americans aren't going to want to import those goods. And so therefore you're going to have a reduction in imports. But people in other countries can more easily afford our goods because their currency buys more of our currency. So that is going to cause an increase in exports. Thus, net exports are going to be going up, which can help the amount of aggregate demand in an economy. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the assessment here. All right, so with these foreign exchange graphs, you could either do the two-graph method or the one-graph method. Most students like to do the one-graph method, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of guide you guys using that one-graph method. So for number one, we're going to graph and describe the effect on the European euro/US dollar exchange rate if Americans develop a preference for European-made automobiles. So if we're doing the one-graph method here, the focus here is going to be on the dollar. So on your y-axis, you're going to have the dollar relative to the euro. The US dollar is going to be closest to the y-axis. And then on the x-axis, you're going to have the quantity of dollars. And then you're going to go ahead and have demand for dollars, supply for dollars. Then you're going to go ahead and either increase the demand for the dollar or increase the supply of the dollar. And tell me what happened to the exchange rate. Did it go up? Did it go down? Did you have an appreciation or depreciation of that US dollar? Moving on to number two here, we're going to graph and describe the effect of the Chinese yuan/US dollar exchange rate if the Chinese economy has a higher price level than the US economy. So once again, we'll focus here on the one graph method. The focus is going to be on the dollar. So on the y-axis, you're going to have the US dollar relative to the yuan. On the x-axis, we're going to have the quantity of dollars, and then the focus is on the dollar here. You go ahead and increase the demand for the dollar or increase the supply of the dollar, and then you tell me what happened to the exchange rate. Did we have an appreciation or a depreciation of the US dollar? Now you're welcome to do the two-graph method if you so decide as well. Alright, so you'll probably need to pause this and we will go on to the summary. So for the summary, in a paragraph, describe what we have learned today. We will see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.